A child is staring at a phone. Homework lies untouched on the table. A parent feels their chest tighten, thoughts racing faster than their patience. The room grows heavy, not with anger at first, but with pressure. In moments like this, understanding often disappears before we even notice, not because parents don't care, but because stress crowds out empathy. So the real question isn't why a parent raises their hand, it's why pressure makes understanding feel suddenly impossible. Violence in parenting is often mistaken for authority or control, but psychologically, it reflects the opposite. It is not a display of power. It is a sign that the brain has reached its limit. When stress accumulates, work pressure, financial anxiety, lack of sleep, unresolved personal wounds, the brain slowly loses access to higher reasoning. What remains is not wisdom, but survival mode. Under cognitive overload, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning, empathy, and self-control, becomes less active. In its place, older neural systems take over. These systems are fast, reactive, and crude. They are designed for danger, not education. In that state, problem-solving feels unavailable. Language feels slow. Reflection feels impossible. The raised hand is not a strategy. It is a collapse of options. The parent is no longer asking, "What does my child need?" but reacting to an internal alarm, "I can't handle this anymore." Understanding this does not excuse harm, but it reframes it. Violence is not evidence of conviction. It is evidence of mental fatigue. And fatigue, unlike character, can be addressed, supported, and healed. Behind most acts of parental violence lies emotional dysregulation, not deliberate cruelty. Anger in these moments is rarely pure anger. It is often layered with exhaustion, fear of failure, shame, and social pressure. Many parents are carrying invisible weights long before the conflict with the child begins. Emotional dysregulation occurs when feelings rise faster than the nervous system can process them. The body reacts before the mind has time to choose. Heart rate increases, muscles tense, the urge to act becomes overwhelming. In this state, impulse control weakens and the gap between feeling and action collapses. Importantly, the parent is not making a calm decision to harm. They are discharging an internal storm. The child becomes the nearest outlet, not because they deserve it, but because they are accessible and powerless. This is why lectures, promises, and guilt often fail to prevent repeated incidents. The issue is not knowledge. It is regulation. Until emotions can be felt without exploding into action, behavior will repeat itself. Healing begins not with judgment, but with learning how to slow the moment down before it turns physical. When a child grows up under the threat of violence, their brain does not interpret the environment as educational. It interprets it as dangerous. Fear activates the body's survival system, flooding the brain with stress hormones designed to help escape harm, not absorb information. In this state, learning becomes biologically difficult. Chronic exposure to fear creates what psychologists call toxic stress. Unlike short-term stress, toxic stress does not resolve. It lingers, reshaping neural development. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for attention, memory, and emotional control, struggles to mature fully. Instead, the brain prioritizes vigilance, scanning for danger, anticipating punishment, staying alert. A child may appear obedient, quiet, or compliant, but this behavior often masks cognitive shutdown. They are not learning rules. They are learning how to avoid pain. Over time, this impairs executive functions such as problem-solving, focus, and emotional regulation. School performance may decline, not from lack of ability, but from a nervous system locked in survival mode. Fear can produce short-term compliance, but it erodes the very systems needed for long-term growth. A brain that is busy surviving cannot fully develop its capacity to understand, reflect, and learn. When violence is repeatedly used as a teaching tool, fear slowly becomes the child's primary language of instruction. The lesson learned is not why behavior is wrong, but what happens if it is repeated. Obedience emerges, but understanding does not. In these environments, compliance is often mistaken for success. The child follows rules quickly, speaks less, and avoids confrontation. Yet this silence is not respect, it is self-protection. The child learns that curiosity invites punishment, that mistakes carry danger, and that honesty is risky. Over time, fear replaces dialogue. Instead of internalizing values, the child externalizes control. Right and wrong are no longer guided by conscience, but by the presence or absence of threat. This weakens moral development and emotional independence. Most damaging is the loss of connection. Education becomes something imposed, not shared. Trust erodes quietly. The child may obey in the moment, but distance grows in the relationship. Fear can shape behavior temporarily, but it cannot build understanding. And without understanding, true learning never takes root. One of the most overlooked skills in parenting is mentalization. The ability to imagine what is happening inside another person's mind. In the context of parenting, it means seeing a child not only as a set of behaviors, but as a developing inner world filled with emotions, intentions, and unmet needs. Parents who rely on violence often struggle with this skill, not because they lack love, but because stress narrows perception. Under pressure, attention collapses onto what is visible and disruptive. The child becomes disobedient, lazy, or difficult, while their internal experience remains unseen. Behavior is treated as the problem rather than a signal. Mentalization creates a pause between action and reaction. Instead of asking, "How do I stop this behavior?" the parent asks, "What might my child be feeling right now?" This shift changes everything. It moves the interaction from control to understanding, from punishment to guidance. Importantly, mentalization does not remove boundaries. It clarifies them. When parents understand the emotional meaning behind behavior, they respond with structure rather than force. Violence fades not because rules disappear, but because meaning replaces impulse. Children rarely have the language to explain their internal states. As a result, behavior becomes their primary form of communication. Crying, defiance, withdrawal, and impulsivity are not random acts. They are messages expressed without words. When these signals are misread, conflict escalates. Curiosity is often mistaken for disruption. Emotional overload is labeled as misbehavior. Resistance is interpreted as disrespect. Yet many so-called problem behaviors reflect developmental limits, not moral failure. A child who throws a tantrum may be overwhelmed, not manipulative. A child who resists rules may be asserting autonomy, not rejecting authority. When parents respond to these signals with violence, the original message is lost. The child learns that expression leads to punishment, and communication shuts down. Over time, emotions go underground, resurfacing later as anxiety, anger, or emotional numbness. Understanding behavior as communication reframes discipline. It invites inquiry instead of assumption. When adults learn to read the language beneath actions, they replace conflict with connection, and guidance becomes possible without fear. There is a reality often left unspoken in discussions about parenting and violence. Parents are human, and humans have limits. Many acts of aggression toward children occur not in moments of deliberate intention, but at the point of emotional collapse. The parent is no longer responding to the child alone. They are reacting to accumulated stress that has nowhere else to go. Chronic exhaustion, financial pressure, lack of support, unresolved trauma, and social isolation all drain emotional resources. Over time, patience erodes. Small challenges begin to feel unbearable. What looks like a sudden outburst is often the final overflow of a system that has been overloaded for too long. Acknowledging this does not excuse harm, but it removes the false narrative that violence comes only from bad parents. It often comes from overwhelmed ones. When parents are never allowed to admit depletion, they are more likely to act it out. This recognition matters because it opens a path forward. When parents are supported, rested, and emotionally regulated, violence decreases. Preventing harm begins not only with educating children, but with caring for the nervous systems of the adults raising them. True strength in parenting is not the ability to dominate a moment, but the capacity to interrupt it. The most powerful skill a parent can develop is the pause, the brief space between impulse and action where choice becomes possible. Pausing does not mean suppressing anger. It means noticing it without obeying it. The body signals distress first, tightening muscles, rising heat, shallow breath. When these cues are recognized early, the nervous system can be slowed before behavior escalates. This is the foundation of self-regulation. The pause allows the prefrontal cortex to re-engage. Words return. Perspective adds. Instead of reacting to the child, the parent regains access to intention. Even a few seconds can transform the outcome, from harm to dialogue, from fear to firmness. Developing this skill takes practice, not perfection. But each moment of restraint teaches both parent and child something vital, that emotions can be felt without being acted upon. In that lesson, real authority is built, not through fear, but through control of oneself. One of the greatest fears parents carry is that without force, they will lose authority. This creates a false dilemma. Either control the child through punishment or surrender to chaos. Psychology offers a third path. Understanding does not mean permissiveness, and empathy does not eliminate boundaries. Children need limits to feel safe. Clear expectations, predictable consequences, and consistency are essential for healthy development. What changes is not the presence of limits, but the way they are delivered. Violence imposes control through fear, while understanding establishes structure through clarity. A calm boundary communicates, "I see you, and I am still responsible." It separates the child's emotions from their actions. A parent can acknowledge frustration while still saying no. They can validate feelings without endorsing harmful behavior. This distinction is crucial. When limits are set without humiliation or pain, children are more likely to internalize them. Discipline becomes a teaching process rather than a power struggle. Authority rooted in understanding does not weaken the parent. It strengthens the relationship that makes guidance effective. Parenting is often framed as a contest of wills. Who gives in, who controls, who wins. But education is not a battlefield. It is a long-term relationship shaped by thousands of small moments of connection or rupture. When violence enters parenting, the immediate conflict may end, but something quieter is lost. Trust erodes. Safety fractures. The child may comply, but the relationship weakens. In contrast, understanding preserves dignity on both sides. It allows correction without humiliation and guidance without fear. True parental growth is not measured by obedience achieved, but by the emotional skills modeled. Children learn how to regulate themselves by watching how adults regulate under pressure. Each moment of restraint teaches resilience. Each moment of understanding teaches safety. Violence ends where curiosity begins, where parents learn to ask what need lies beneath behavior and what their own reactions are trying to express. Parenting is not about winning today. It is about preserving a relationship that allows both minds to mature together.